Dun, dun, dun. We're live. It's 7:18. A little late. It's all right. It's all good. Tonight we're going to talk about the thumbnail to help. I'm going to show you the thumbnail, actually. And it is a 5-liter Ford. This one was a 327 stroker, so it was a 3,250 stroke. It was still a cast crank. Did have 4 throttles and 4 pistons in it. Quite honestly, we could have done this with a stock 302, which we did also. We ran boost on a number of the 302s as well. But it's so easy to make power with boost. So to put this into perspective, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what's going on. Just do a little prep work here. So, and I'm falling. So our data graph. Our NA motor, horsepower, torque, a little less than 400 horsepower, 392. Similar kind of torque numbers. Way over 600 horsepower. Excuse me. At 6,000 RPM, made 617. Peak torque checked in at 560-ish foot-pounds. You can see, big power. Easily over 600 horsepower. This is what our combination looked like for guys who wanted to know what the thumbnail looks like. Sometimes you can't see the thumbnail very well. How do you like this? For our blow-off valve. Yeah, that's just tape on a cap. This one was a Novi, probably a 1200 or something, I'm thinking. Very similar to the Vortex. If we had the PAXTON Vortex kind of enclosure there. I'll go ahead and bring up the, let's see if I have the 3.33-inch blower pulley. Timing was locked. We ran it at 29 degrees total. Chain plate with the jetting was a Paxton Novi 1200. And again, so simple to run that kind of power that you're more than likely just going to get yourself in trouble here. I'm going to see if I can find the. This is like, I don't know, 8 or 9 pounds or something like that. Not very much boost either. And that's a great thing. And that's how easy it is. Because if you take a 5-liter combination, it would be not unusual at all to have a 400 horsepower-ish 302. You could do it carbureted like we did with a blow-through. You could do it fuel injected with a decent manifold, the Holley Systemax, the RPM2 from Edelbrock. There are a few good ones, and right now I'd like to try the Holley high ram. That would be even better, especially put more camshaft in it. This particular one had a smaller camshaft in it. Was a 327, but with normally I put the Extreme Energy 274, but I think in this one we ran the 266, and it had Victor Jr. heads, which are back then mediocre heads. They're not airflow research, they're not trick flow, but they were not bad. And so again, 5-liter. This one's a 327, as I said, but this one was still less than 10-1 because it had dish pistons in it. So it was more like in the mid 9-ish compression. So again, nothing stellar about it. As we saw from the NA power output being 392 horsepower, not anything to write home about. Just your average kind of deal. So pretty easy to do this, to duplicate this on a 302. Like I said, carbureted, dual plane, 274 cam, any kind of aluminum head with a dual plane on it, or that same combination with something better than a GT40 intake manifold, a ported Cobra one, which I'd like to try from the guys that are doing that now. I'd like to try one of those. Or like I said, the better manifolds. The high ram would definitely be better. It would definitely make more power up top. We could rev it higher than 6,000, as we saw in the previous testing. When we run a centrifugal blower at higher engine speeds, if we don't get belt flippage, the boost goes up, the power goes up. But again, on a stock, this is a stock 5-liter late model hydraulic roller block. Do you have to be worried about, let me know in the comments. Do you have to be worried? Oh, here, this is why the audio is probably not great. I haven't moved it over. Thank you guys for reminding me. But do you have to start being worried about the power output and the block splitting on the 5 liter? In my opinion, I don't think you do, because I'll tell you, when I ran the Silver State race, we ran it at I don't know, 8 or 9 pounds 1 year, and we ran it a wide open throttle for a half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever, and it ran just fine. It never split the block. It didn't do anything. So not very many people can say that about running power for that long a period of time at wide open throttle. And it didn't do anything. So that was a supercharged 302 with trick flow high port heads, the 274 cam. It was the crane version, actually, and supported Cobra lower, I think, or something, or ported Cobra upper and lower manifold. So it's, it's making decent power. Probably not 600, but less than that. But still, we ran it for a long time. But would we have to worry about that on this kind of combination where we're making more power? But the point is that it's so easy to make that kind of power. You have a 400 horsepower motor, and then you at 10 pounds or 9 pounds or whatever, you turn it into a 600 horsepower motor, 600 plus horsepower motor, and it works. Again, you start getting into the thing, and on my car, we ran the supercharged combination. You guys talk about the T5. Oh, the strength of T5, those blow up all the time. No, they don't just blow up from it just sitting there. Guys act like you just walk by a Mustang and the T5 explodes. They explode from abuse is what happens. Because I had the same T5 in my Mustang, and I ran it in umpteen like showroom stock races. I ran it for years and years and years with a supercharger. We ran it on nitrous. I went to top speed events. We went to drag race events. We did our fair share of having fun out on the street. I took that transmission out and put it in our World Challenge car. I think we ended up hurting the transmission in the World Challenge car, the Bridgestone supercar, more because of deceleration than acceleration. We had pad knock, and it was upsetting. It was affecting my heel and toe. And so the decel part of it, I think, was more of a problem. But, the transmission, and we shifted, when you're road racing for 45 minutes or an hour, you do a lot of shifts, a lot more than a guy sees in a lifetime of drag racing. So it's the abuse that does it. I'm not saying a T5 will withstand a million foot-pounds of torque or horsepower or whatever. But I know that it won't withstand the kind of abusive shifting that guys do. But if you shift it, it works fairly well. And as indicated by this, in my car, we ran the road racing, drag racing, all kinds of stuff, and then ran it with a blower and nitrous and all kinds of stuff. And never once did the transmission say, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. So I think if you're nice to them, they'll do a lot more than people think. In this particular test, interesting side note, in this particular test, the comparison actually was this centrifugal supercharger versus a turbo versus a roots blower. And unfortunately, I didn't. So one of those tests I'd like to go back and redo. Not that I don't think that the result is going to be the same. I just want to give a better test result for the roots blower, which was like a 174 Holley, positive displacement roots blower with a carburetor on it. And it didn't quite make the peak boost that the turbo and the centrifugal did. So I wish that I would have done that. It would have helped the positive displacement a little bit, but still it's not really even in the same, as we saw from that test, the almost identical test that I did on the Honda B series, and then the almost identical test that I did on the modular Ford. We see that the roots blower is not a player, and as we go up in power, it becomes less and less of a player in terms of comparison for peak horsepower. Now, the one thing I can say is, if you compare the roots blower to the centrifugal blower, the roots blower makes a lot more like immediate power down low, despite the fact that it uses a really, really short runner. The thing that's nice is it has a lot of immediate boost response, so it is overcoming all of the loss of runner length and more but it would be better with more runner length. But it does make more low speed power than the centrifugal does. And where this was really noticeable was when I put one of the Vortex setups on a Honda B series. We put it on the Bonneville motor to begin with, and I did lots of testing with it. And we eventually had to build our own setup because they had a jack shaft going, and so you drive a pulley off of the crank, and then they would send a jack shaft and mount the blower kind of closer to the other side, the front side of the motor where the distributor and everything is, or the back side, depending on how you're looking at the transmission side. And then they would blow into the throttle body. But you could really tell that supercharger was soft down low because the Honda motor itself is soft down low, and really came up, when it was making 10 pounds or whatever at 8,000 RPM, it felt really good. But when we did the comparison of running that to the turbo, it really showed why, when you have a turbo combination, that the turbo is making a lot more average power and it feels better. There's lots of uses for the centrifugal blowers, and they work real. And I loved having mine on my Mustang. I raced it around all the time, and it worked very, very well. But that's why I did these tests comparing the different forms of force induction, because people want to see, what that difference is, what happens when we run these different things. And then you get to decide, just like with a camshaft, where do I want my power? Like, where do I want this thing making power? Where am I most concerned about it? Am I willing to trade, like with the Roots blower? I want more low speed power and less up top. Am I willing to trade that? Is that what I want? And then the centrifugal would be the other way. And the turbo would be, well, you don't have nearly the immediate boost response, like a 2,000 RPM if you're just to nail it. A turbo doesn't have what the other ones have. It has what the centrifugal has, but not what the Roots blower or the twin screw does. So again, that's the beauty of having all these things to choose from. But sometimes, especially for the uninitiated, it tends to make it a little bit more confusing. And that's why I do all this testing. I try to spell it out so that everybody can go, oh, look, Richard explained it. He doesn't care whether I buy a twin screw or a Roots or a centrifugal or a turbo. I have no vested interest in that. I don't care about it. I just want to give you the data, and then we can talk about, okay, I can steer you in the direction. Once I find out the thing that you want, like what's your hot button or hot buttons if you have multiple ones, just like with camshafts. Well, what's the best cam? Well, the best cam is the one that does the thing that you want it to do. Same thing with intake manifold. Same thing with cylinder heads. Maybe it's a price point. Maybe it's the chop. Maybe it's whatever all these things are. And then once we find out what that is, we get it to you, then that's the best one of those. So we'll see what you guys have going on tonight. We are going to get a poll going. Have you ever run more than 10 PSI on a boosted motor? Let's see what we got going on. Well, Leader Mafia, one of these days, I'm going to come back from West Tech and say, hey, I dragged the sprint motor out. I have a bell housing made for it. Would the bare bones boost setup be if piecing something together for like no money? It would be a turbo with no intercooler would be the cheap way to do it. Weld it yourself, get a junkyard turbo, or now since turbos are so cheap for a couple $100, get a turbo online. Still have to get injectors, pump. But you could go get, you really could go get, pumps are cheap, but you could get injectors if you can find the dual fuel injectors. You can step things up quite a bit. Boost does fix everything. Christian, good to hear, man. Top fuel reference. Ford 2.3 liter, 500 plus, nice. Big block question. How much boost will a GM steel crank and rods hold? All of it. We didn't, to give you an idea, we've made like 1100 plus horsepower with a stock bottom end Gen 6 454, which I don't think is a steel crank. And it's definitely not a steel rod. And it's a cast piston. So you'll be fine. Yeah, the puppies are awake now. So Monza Racer, you've seen them split before? Why do you have only one 463 valve video on your channel? So I need more on that. I've done more testing on 3-valve stuff. I've done turbo stuff and I've done blower stuff, made my own manifold for one. Mad, why are you asking your question 3 times? Dags? Sure, I like Dags. We switched 347 parts out of the stock block and the aftermarket blocks and saw actual power gains, not from the new parts as one came in. Swapped to new blocks and no new parts. You did a block swap? I've done that before on LS stuff. Twin supercharged 462 valve with 2 PAXTON Novi 1000s. Goes on the dyno of the spring. One PAXTON would get made 390 wheel horsepower. So I'm curious, not that I don't think having 2 of them isn't cool, because it's very, very cool. But why did you put 2 of them on it if you're only at 400 wheel horsepower right now? Because you're nowhere near the flow rate of one of those Novi 1000s. Saw Supercharged Monte Carlo. That's the 3800, right? Was it signed by Dale Earnhardt? I have a 351 Windsor van that wants better heads and intake. 93 EFI EEC4. Stock computer does not like to be tuned. I have an 88 5-liter Mustang. Is the van EEC4 different? Is it not like a... Mine's an A9L, I think. Truck Norris over the Truck Stage 3. Yeah, I would definitely pick the Truck Norris, especially in a 5.3. Logic. Why is the air fill showing 12.3, but you think it's running rich? 11 psi, 4.6, 2 valve. Oh, it's a stock motor. Okay, that makes sense. Put it in a drop tank Lakester. I'll build the body. I do like drop tank Lakesters. I started at 12 and now at 20. So you voted yes. That's right. That's good, Turbo Centra. Why don't Pro Mods run titanium? I think titanium is isn't it more brittle than the aluminum is? $10 psi for my breakfast. That's nice. Logic, what's up? 22 psi, 1.8. Thank you very much. 1.8 T, nice. 26 psi, 3-liter N54 BMW, nice. My wife's Mercedes runs 20 pounds. £27 of my F2 ProCharge 427. That's got to make a lot of power then, right? Well, they ran the old Kennyville 1.5. Yeah, that's old school. 9 pounds at mile high. BW Rabbit saw 16 psi with nitrous and 12 psi with a 40 shot. My Edge, 20 pounds with tiny twins. Yeah, you had twins on your Edge. Was that was the Edge a V6? Are oil only turbos as reliable for road racing or street use as water cooled turbos? No. Water cooled would be better. 23 psi on N54. That's probably making good power then on the BMW motor. I was curious what psi fuel pump should I use compared to my injectors. I plan to swap an LY6. The fuel pump is not rated like that. Well, the flow rate of the fuel pump is rated at a specific pressure, but you'll be running some sort of system pressure that won't be dictated by the fuel pump. It will be dictated by the regulator. So you need a fuel pump that will support the flow rate of the power output that you want. So if you're trying to make 500 horsepower, you need a fuel pump that will support 500 horsepower, will flow enough to support 500 horsepower at 58 psi on an LY6. $33 psi in your Evo. I think the most I've ever run is that 30-pound run or 29 point something pound run on the Big Bang motor. 2013 Caprice. I add nitrous to the cam ZR1 engine. You have a ZR1 engine? Like an old school one or a new one? Like the LT5? Yeah, oh, that's true. Diesel boost levels. Although I think even on the Cummins that I had with the turbo and the programmer thing that we had in there, I still think it was only 20 pounds or something. Stock 99 GTP boost level, 7 pounds, 7.5 pounds or so. Daylight savings changes this weekend. It does. Cool. Still trying to find a way to get all-wheel drive behind a Turbo LS. 97 S1043, is it worth building at all? It depends on your desired power level. I have 4.3 videos up, but Turbo with the 4.3 solves some problems. Man. So the guy asking about the water-cooled and oil-cooled turbos, water-cooled and oil-cooled is better than just oil-cooled. It's definitely factory turbos. Like we look at the Omni Turbo, it was water-cooled. They last a long time. They're better, but that's not the question. The question is, can you make a non-water-cooled turbo work and drive around? And are you actually thinking that you're going to be driving and owning your car for another 50, 100, 200, 300,000 miles? Those are really the questions. Your WRX runs 24 pounds in first gear. Does the transmission take that? What water-cooled turbo would you recommend for a Texas Speed 408? Power goal of 1,000 horsepower. I don't know which ones are water-cooled. 1,000 horsepower is S475 or BS Racing 7875. Gen 2 or Gen 3 level, an S480. An S480 on a 408 probably wouldn't be bad. Factory V6. I've got two GT 2871Rs, oil, water, turbos, and turbo headers in my back seat for my Monza project. Very cool. literally filling my shop with fuel-smelling smoke. Holly shows a good air fuel and everything's running pretty decently. So literally belching out fuel-fueled smoke. So is it black smoke? Is it blue smoke? What is it? And do you have the sensor after the turbo? Where do you have your O2 sensor at? Jimmy, you saved me so much time and money. Happy to help, man. I rode my friend's turbo Ford Lightning pickup, 20 pounds. Yeah, that counts. Totally counts. 20 pounds was it with the Eden supercharger? I hope not. Turbo sensor. I think I'd run something bigger than the 340. Don't they have 420s or 500s or something? The flow rate from a supercharger is 1700 CFM, more than a PAXTON Novi 2000. I want to know if I can make or lose power. Just putting them on there and running them at the same boost, you're probably going to lose power because you're having to drive the other supercharger and you're not taking advantage of what the supercharger has to offer. But let me know what happens when you test it. I have a 2013 Caprice. I added to the ZR1 cam engine and nitrous. Can I use nitrous without harming the engine? I don't know what you mean. I need to know what you mean by ZR1 cam engine. I don't know what that is. What year is the engine? Is the engine different than the year of the car? What year did the engine come from? And what engine is it exactly? No, and don't say ZR1 again. Tell me what year it is. I have an adjustable fuel pressure regulator. Shows 48 psi during cranking, but 43 at idle. And at idle, it smokes like crazy. If you have a vacuum reference going to the top of the fuel pressure regulator, when the car is idling, it has vacuum on that. So it's going to change the diaphragm. It's going to change the spring position. And so it's going to have less pressure. What you need to be concerned with setting your pressure is actually with the car not running or with the car running and the vacuum line pulled off and plugged, and then look at the pressure then and set the idle pressure like that. Because with a vacuum on it, it's going to be lower, and you want it to be. Big boost diesels can be scary. If that question appears one more time, you are going to be gone. Turbo Centric, get a second one if you can fit it, or the 525 will do you. 4.3 Torque Storm. The Torque Storm does bolt onto the 4.3. VW Rabbit. Oh, diesel pickup. Very cool. Points for that. 18 pounds. Kept pushing out the head gasket. But boy, did it make power. I don't think he needs a 700 liter per hour pump for 400 at the tire. Upgrading my H2 Hummer 4L65 to 4L80. I don't even think a stock 4L80 will, the weight and the turbo is going to be difficult. My oil is definitely contaminated with fuel. I don't want to place blame. Nitrous oxide does not, if it's applied in the right proportion and applied with in addition to retarding timing that they recommend, about 4 degrees for 100 horsepower gain. Nitrous, I've run, I don't know, 50 bottles of nitrous through my Mustang, and it works just fine. And it doesn't harm the motor as long as you do it properly. 700 R4. I don't know about a stock one. Is that a built one? Who makes a standalone controller for 4L80E? Somebody's got to, right? Does Holley make one, or does TCI or any of those guys? Thought my built Mustang and 23 PSI BMW 335 were fast. That I got it handed to me by a built 455 Buick. Your 351 has a loose timing chain. It means I have to replace the stock cam one in there. That's right. If you're taking you're already there, if you're taking the timing chain off. Where does Cletus get his money? Have you seen how many views his videos have? Have you seen his pay-per-view stuff? Have you seen the companies that he owns? He's doing really, really well. He's a really good businessman. Has anyone tried 100% oxygen? Yeah, it's very volatile and not a good idea. Quick 4 control for the 4L80E. How's our poll doing? 59% saying yes. Run more than 10 PSI. Whenever I run low boost on stuff on the engine dyno, I always get the same comments. Why are you running only 7 or 8 pounds? Nobody runs 7 or 8 pounds. I'm like, well, actually, not nobody does. That's not accurate. You might say that you don't, and that you don't like it, and then you want more boost, and that you run more boost, but just saying that is not enough. It's not persuasive enough. Everybody does this. No, just you do it. There might be others too, and you can include them, but you don't get to include everybody. It's like everybody thinks that their favorite color is red. My favorite color is red, so everybody else's must be red too. And if your favorite color isn't red, then you're bad. That's not the way that it works. Yeah, Monza. When they were doing all the testing for they tried all all of the available compounds, including pure oxygen. And when they were trying it for the back when they were doing it for development of piston engine stuff for the war, and they tried all those compounds, and nitrous oxide worked the best. It was the best combination of safe power delivery. Plus, they had to consider in a plane how much can you carry. So, what is the weight versus the power gain? What is the complexity? What is the safety? All of that stuff. And nitrous oxide was the best thing. And then they're like, it's really, it's even better than like a nitrous assisted piston engine. It's just a jet engine. It's way better. Puppet Master, what's up? The example I normally use is people telling me that, if I go outside and tell them the sky is blue, and they're trying to convince me through some sort of manipulation or threats or anger or violence or whatever. No, the sky's red. I'm like, look, you can tell me that all that you want. I don't even need to get I don't need to get other people around me to tell me that the sky is blue. We know that it is. Everybody knows that it's been that way since the dawn of time, and will continue to be that way until maybe the sun decides that it's not going to be that way anymore or whatever. But for right now, it is that. But, no, you don't know what you're talking about because of this and this and this. 350 wheel horsepower, 1 bar, FDRX7. Nice. Blew it up shortly after that. .2 psi on accident. Nice. The Walboro pumps are good brands. I am feeling better. It's the weekend. Need some kind of moving object in the background. Thought it was frozen. It's just me. Let it go. Let it go. I'll tell you that's not frozen, right? But before dumping the piston engine, they figured out water methanol and high compression supercharged engines made serious power. Well, they figured out that water methanol injection allowed serious power and allowed it safely. But that was early on in the development. In fact, the water methanol injection or the water injection came about before nitrous did. The sky isn't blue. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson would say something different. Electrical plugs on the Holly harness pressed into the stock fuel rails and caused an unsealing condition for the snake eater injectors. I had to trim some plastic off the plugs to stop leaks. It's important that all those fit. Taming of the shrew. They've come a long way since the what do we have back in the Mustang days? We had the 88, the 110, the 155, and then when they came out with the 255, it was gigantic. I think they had a 190 too. Looking for recommendation on a good boost controller. The Turbo Smart stuff works good. Most of the time we use a manual one, which is really easy. Christian, I don't understand your question. First car was an 85 RX-7 GSL SE. Ooh, a fancy one. Oh, okay. I didn't. That doesn't sound good. Obviously, we don't want you to do that. Got to hang in there. Things will get better. But what's going on with the Trailblazer SS? Can we steer you in the right direction? A Granger valve. And see, the Granger valve stuff happened after me. We used to use the fish valves because those were $1.99 or whatever. The aquarium valves. Ford trucks all used to come with Walboro 180s or bigger. Not the factory 302 Ford trucks didn't. Back when I'm talking about in the 80s. A 180 pump back then would have been huge. The ones that we had in the Mustangs were 88 liters an hour. Currently building a 5.3 for boost, looking at VS Racing 7875. What's going to be the difference between the AR 132 and 98? Well, the 98 is going to spool better than a 132 does. And what kind of power are you trying to make? Probably I would steer you toward the 98 on a 5.3 with that size turbo. AJ, you should run a stage 1 cam. That's a lot of rear gear. On a 6-liter, you could put a instead of if you don't want to do a stage 1, you could put a Truck Norris in it. Stock pump I pulled out of my 93 GT was 95 liters an hour. Maybe they stepped them up in the. My 94 Z28 came with a 190. Motorsports and fun. What kind of wheel horsepower does it take to get 3,500 pounds into the 899s? Go to Wallace Racing and plug in all of your data, and it will tell you. And then it's going to take more than whatever they tell you, because whatever they tell you is usually an optimum. It's just like with this, the quarter mile calculator stuff, the little slide rule deals that they have. Those are for optimum launches, and it's sometimes hard to get that. I got a 450 liter per hour now. I have to realize that it'll probably give up its life to support what I want. Just 500 wheel horsepower. 450 liters per hour is enough to do that. It's a lot of gear. 256, because you must be like roll racing up to 300 miles an hour or whatever with that gear, right? I've never seen the fuel pumps marked with anything but a part number. I've never seen them marked with something that says 255 or anything like that. Blake, I have a stock bottom end 4.8 with a VSR 7875 and a sloppy best cam. That sounds like Matt's no BS kind of combination there. '67 Nova, 2001 5.3. Don't really go fast for short distance. Actually, for 650, you can do that with a stock cam, but I'd put a small camshaft in it. The Truck Norris is a good one. And then you have to put 80-pound injectors in it. The stock injectors in a 5-liter Mustang were 19-pounders, except for the Cobras. Those got the 24-pounders. And then I think they had 30-pounders in something, probably the supercharged cars or something, and 36s and something. Are stock cam lifters okay for turbo application? Yes. I have lots of videos up with stock cams and boost. Pink girly drink. As a matter of fact, I did. I have SRT4 that I run an M1. Next up will be M20. Not M21. M20, M21, whatever it takes. Single turbo S475. 455 Pontiac has a Lanati Voodoo cam. Okay. Perform RPM headers. With the small cam, would it be a big power difference putting aftermarket? I didn't see the rest of your thing. Oh, Edelbrock heads on it. Has 6X heads that clean up the ports a little bit. I don't know what 6X heads you have, and I don't know what the chamber size difference is between the heads that you have on there now and what you're putting on. And I also don't know how much the stock Edelbrock heads flow on the Pontiac versus what your heads flow. So I wish I could help, but I just don't know enough about the two heads to tell you. My favorite drink is the next one. I have a couple 351 Clevelands in the garage. I'll have open chamber heads. Can you run those heads with a supercharger? Yes. An iron head itself is not good. Those open chamber heads are also not good. I don't know where the piston is in the hole, but that's probably also not good. But with the right timing and octane and intercooling, and you can run some boost on it. Turbocenter's out. Hey, you got me questioning my fuel system. Well, my 400 liter per hour with 52 pound injector support 500 wheel horsepower. There's good, man. There's good oil pump data or fuel pump data. Is Kenny Bell has a bunch of stuff on theirs because they actually have a fuel pump dyno. It's a whole test rig for fuel pumps, so it's very, very cool. And they've done a lot of that, and you can calculate. There's pretty easy calculations for liters per hour to gallons per hour to horsepower and all that. Is there a reason you don't use link bar lifters? I have used link bar lifters in the past, but there's zero reason to use them on an LS motor, at least on the junkyard LS motors that I put together. There's no reason to use a link bar lifter. It doesn't add anything to the equation. Yeah, more power. I think so too. I don't think that I don't remember when they switched over, if they switched over from an 88 liter per hour pump, because they didn't need to, because they didn't change the power output for those until they went to the 260 horsepower PI motors. In 98 it was 225, but they were rating the 5 liter at 225 anyway. So they were playing with rating numbers toward the end of the 5 liter deal, and then because they wanted the power rating number that they had for the 462 valve, the non-PI motor, to look okay. And then they eventually ended up with 225 and then 260 for the PI motor. So maybe they stepped up and pumped then, but I can't swear that. I have to ask Mark Sanchez on that. Tim, I don't know. I don't know about that particular turbo. I don't know what the wheel size is. But if you're looking for 450 horsepower, 10 psi on a 4.3 liter, look at a GT35. Well, see if you can use a Racetronics hotwire kit. The Kenny Bell boosted pump, they've sold thousands of those, and those work really well. I've used them on a lot of stuff. I had one on the Civic. The open chamber Cleveland head actually is not less detonation prone; it's more detonation prone. At least from all the stuff that I've read. I've not done a detonation test back to back, so I'm just parroting the stuff that I've read about it. Even though the other one has higher compression. Wheel horsepower, fuel pump dependency on 85 versus 93 flex fuel sensor. If you're going with the 85, you need a lot bigger fuel pump. Running a 255, making 456 wheel horsepower. But it's an NA. That helps a lot. Richard, are you going to watch the Formula One Las Vegas Grand Prix in November? I might watch it on TV. I'm not going to go there, I don't think. Will a Dash 6 fuel line support 700 to 800 horsepower? Yes, very easily. We've run 1,000 horsepower with 5/16 line. using link bar lifters on my Gen 2 LT4. Why does the link bar allow you to run higher spring pressure? I don't see how those two things are related. A factory Pontiac D port head is going to flow 200 to 210. Edelbrock round port heads flow 270. Okay, so they are a lot better. My 6S heads flow 225, 230. Yeah, so you have, if your cam is, if you're using a cam that is at least 500 lift, you'll be able to take advantage of what that head has to offer. And I would put the aluminum Edelbrock head on there, even if it was exactly the same, because it's an aluminum head and it would be better. I don't know about the icon thing, but thank you. Let's see. The Edelbrock heads are supposed to be good. Aren't they hard to get right now, though, for the Pontiacs? I heard painting your cooler and charge pipes will add a few horsepower. Do you have to paint them a specific color? What clearances do you run with your 1,000 horsepower build? The 1,000 horsepower junkyard motors that already have their clearances built in, except for ring gap. The ring gap we do change. But if I'm building a motor, I would put more rod and main bearing clearance in than the factory has. The factory has really, really tight clearances, and that's part of the reason that they have so much oil pressure. Josh, your dash 6 line will be fine. Dash 8 will be fine. All of that's fine. No, we've run dash 8 line. The dash 8 line that we ran was for 1,500 horsepower. Well, 85 damage a carburetor. If it sits in there long enough, it can leave deposits in there. I don't know about the pump, but the 60-pound injectors, if you multiply 60 times 16, they can support 960 horsepower NA, 720 horsepower under boost, and 600 horsepower on E85. 612. But a 400 pump probably wouldn't do that, though. $45 per hour MST EFI pump, enough for 300 horsepower 4-cylinder. Your MST EFI pump should be the rating should be different than that. The flow numbers I'm giving you would be 100% duty cycle. But it's not. But it's at a brake specific on the NA motor. It's at a brake specific of 0.5, and there's no LS in the world that runs a brake specific of 0.5. It'd all be much better than that. Ron, I just gave you the numbers. Multiply the flow rate for a V8. Multiply the flow rate of the injector by 16. That gives you the NA power output. Then multiply that by 0.85. That gives you the and I think I did it. I think I did a reverse on that one. Multiply by 0.85, and that gives you the boosted number. And then multiply that number by 0.75, and then that gives you the boosted E85 number. Just because it takes more fuel, because you're running it richer when you're running boost, and it takes even more fuel when you're running 85. That's what happens. We'll close out our poll at 57%. 10 PSI, the 10 crew, the Bo Derek crew. James, what are we taking note of? How's your boost going to run on a Marine? 464. Does it have ring gap? And can you tune it? £45 is probably the fuel pressure, I'm thinking. This poster right here is a top speed standing mile thing that I did with the guys from Vortec for one of the magazines. A bunch of cars showed up for a standing mile deal at it was Lemoore Air Base. $11 to 153 with 600 lift cam. Unfortunately, none of that tells me anything about what the power of that motor is going to make. I need to know what the duration of the camshaft is. I need to know what heads are on it. I need to know what intake is on it. No ring gap. And what kind of fuel are you running on it? On your big block in your boat? James, taking note. Flow rate, like a 50-pound injector, times 16. They'll support 800 horsepower. NA, right? That's right. And then we multiply that times 0.85. So those 50-pound injectors will support 680 horsepower because it's 800 times 0.85. That was 680 horsepower. And then times 0.75, 510 horsepower on E85. My dog started barking at Richard's dogs. They're talking to each other. Would a GT45 be okay for a 402 10 to 1 for daily strip use? No, it's too small. It's a 700 horsepower turbo. If you want to make more than that, you need a bigger turbo. And on a 402, I would put a bigger turbo on it anyway. I'd put a 78, 75 on it or something like that. I've always limited duty cycle to 90% before suggesting larger injectors. Well, you could get into all that too, and you could also get into what RPM you're doing all this at, because that's going to change things too. But I don't worry about if you're trying to max out the power and max out the flow of the injector. I think those things go together. When I ran the Mustang, I ran it at 100% duty cycle at 100 psi for a half an hour. So You can do it. But by that, I mean, you should way oversize your injector. There's no reason to run an injector to make 1,000 horsepower that will just make 1,000 horsepower. You want injectors that will make 12 or 1,300 horsepower so that you don't have to run them at 100%, but also so that you have room to grow. Because if you have a turbo motor and you make 1,000 horsepower and you keep making runs at 1,000 horsepower and everything's going great, you're definitely going to turn it up or put a bigger turbo on it. So you might as well oversize the turbo, because you can always have it flow less fuel. That's really easy to do with the computer. You can't make it flow more fuel once it's out of fuel. You have a 234, 244 in a 5.3. Is it a stock one? No, if it's 11-to-1, then you have pistons in it, right? Because that's a pretty big camshaft. But you need something. You need injectors that are going to, let's say, are going to support if it's an NA motor, and you have decent heads on it. You would need, I don't know, you need at least 500 horsepower. And I wouldn't, like I said, I would never put injectors in there that will only support 500. You need something that's going to support 600 or 700 or 800, because it's not going to hurt you in any way. This is all engine horsepower. Man, it's obviously time to go. Is it a good idea or bad idea to wrap the headers in a turbo application? It's a good idea to keep heat into the turbo, but it's a bad idea for the longevity of the header. Logic. Then if you're gonna, if it's a 500 and you're gonna run that much compression in that camshaft on a 5.3, he does. If it's going to be a turbo application, he doesn't need either one of those. I would run less compression. I would run way less camshaft than that. $60 times 16. No, 60-pound injectors is 816 horsepower. I told you I did that backwards. And 693, because I did my multipliers backwards. If I lock in timing at 42 degrees across the board, how well is it going to run? It's not going to start very well. And is this an NA motor that you're doing? And that it's just a really bad idea, because it doesn't want 42 degrees at wide open throttle at 2,000 RPM. It's probably going to detonate and rattle itself to death. Sounds like a lot. I wonder where we've heard that. $45 gallons per hour. That makes more sense. So now you get to go to Wallace Racing and see what the conversion is for gallons per hour to liters per hour, or pounds an hour from gallons per hour to pounds an hour. And then you can calculate the power output. Let's see. $45 times, I'm going to say 7. It's probably not that much. Times 2. Probably a 600 horsepower pump. I was called crazy for buying my Trailblazer SS with 50-pound injectors for my LS4. We run 1,500-pound injectors on stock LS3s, or stock stock 4.8 liters, so stock LR4s. So You can do that. You can always turn it down. I mean, it can get so big that it's not going to idle very well if it gets really big. But, you can, like I said, it's real easy to do. Chicago, take a look at all the 6-liter tests I have up. Christian, 12 degrees across the board is not enough. 42 degrees across the board is about 12 or 13 too much, even at the maximum, even at the horsepower peak. When we run them, if we run an LS on the engine dyno, about 29 total at the power peak, and then less everywhere else below that on an NA motor. We run lock distributors on the engine dyno sometimes. Oh, it's a Pro Charger. Okay. 12 degrees makes a lot more sense than 42. Injector calculations. Wallace Racing probably has injector calculators, and also Kenny Bell. I've seen an NA LS with 38 degrees make its fastest pass. Okay. I've never seen an NE LS on the dyno ever make the most power at 38 degrees. In fact, it would be making much less power at 38 degrees. That's okay. Okay, run whatever you want. And on that note, it is time to go, though. I will be back in the morning. Hopefully you guys are having a good Friday night and then a good weekend, but we'll talk about that in the morning.